Subscribe for more mysteries, unsolved and unexplained.
Welcome back to The Explainer. So let's jump straight into this, because today we are literally cracking open a 300-year-old cold case to look at one of history's absolute most chilling mysteries. We're talking about the man in the Iron Mask. And honestly, this story has the whole shebang. Secret identities, massive royal scandals, maximum security prisons, and a guy whose face was just completely erased from the world. We're gonna sift through the facts, cut out the fiction, and trace exactly what happened to a man who spent 34 years locked away in the shadows.
To really get a sense of the life or death stakes here, you have to hear this actual quote from 1711. King Louis XIV's sister-in-law, Princess Palatine, wrote a letter with this exact chilling detail. 2 musketeers at his side to kill him if he removed his mask. I mean, just imagine the sheer paranoia it takes to have armed guards constantly watching one single masked prisoner, under strict orders to execute him on the spot if his face was ever shown. That level of extreme wild secrecy, it absolutely sent rumors flying through the heart of the French court.
Section 1. The Velvet Mask Reality.
And here is where we hit our first massive twist. The whole Iron Mask thing, it perfectly illustrates the divide between fiction and fact. Pop culture gave us this towering figure trapped in a terrifying, heavy iron helmet, basically right out of a sensational thriller, right? Because let's be real, a big iron helmet looks absolutely incredible on a theater poster. But the reality of it was much grimmer and honestly a lot quieter. They morphed a tragic, silenced guy into this larger-than-life legend. But the truth is actually far more fascinating.
So what actually happened? Well, the famous French philosopher Voltaire totally misreported the mask as being made of iron back in 1771, and the world just kind of ran with it. The historical reality, which we found in official archives, reveals it was actually just a black velvet cloth. And get this, he didn't even wear it 24/7. No way. He was only forced to cover his face when he was traveling between prisons or when going to prayers in his final years. Modern historians actually believe this velvet mask was just a prop, imposed by his incredibly narcissistic jailer, Saint Mars. He did it solely to boost his own prestige, basically making his prisoners seem like a massive VIP so the jailer himself looked more important. Wow, right?
Section 2. 34 years in shadows. Now, let's track this absolutely exhausting 34-year timeline. Our prisoner was initially arrested way back in the summer of 1669 under the name Eustache d'Alger. For the next 3.5 decades, he was dragged all across France. He went from the freezing Pygmy-Roll dungeon in the Alps to Exil's fort, then down to the island fortress of Sainte Marguerite, and finally all the way to the infamous Bastille in Paris. And the reason for this bizarre, unending road trip? Whenever his highly ambitious jailer, Saint Mars, got promoted to a new prison, the masked man was forced to pack up and go with him.
The extreme conditions at those early prisons, like Pygmy-Roll and Exil's, are just mind-boggling. When Doggio was first sent to Pygmy-Roll, the Minister of War gave incredibly strict, frankly terrifying instructions. They built his cell with multiple thick doors closing right upon each other. Why? Simply to prevent anyone on the outside from listening in. Doggio was threatened with immediate death if he ever spoke about anything other than his basic, immediate needs. He was, quite literally, a man buried alive inside stone. Which brings us to his grim final years. In 1698, Saint Mars got his big promotion to governor of the Bastille in Paris. Our prisoner arrived in a closed, curtained litter, his face covered by that famous black cloth. He was placed deep in the Barretaudière Tower. After an entire lifetime hidden in the shadows, he quietly died there on November 19, 1703. They hastily buried him in the local cemetery the very next day under the fake name Marchioli. His entire life just completely erased.
Section 3. The Valet Connection.
Okay, here's where our investigation pivots sharply. When we look directly at the Marquis de Louvois's secret correspondence, the most guarded man in France, this guy who caused endless rumors of royalty was explicitly labeled in these official letters as only a valet. The documents state he was jailed for what he was employed to do before his arrest and for what he knew. Think about that. This wasn't a king. This was an everyday employee who just happened to be carrying a very dangerous secret.
Let's break down what that actually meant back then. A valet is simply a male servant. But here is the specific detail that completely destroys the idea that he was secretly royalty. Saint Mars actually allowed Eustache d'Alger to work as a prison servant for another inmate, the disgraced superintendent Nicolas Fouquet. Now consider the incredibly rigid class system of 17th century France. The authorities would never, under any circumstances, force a prince of the blood or the king's brother to fold clothes and clean up after a commoner like Fouquet. It just absolutely wouldn't happen.
Section 4. Unmasking the royal theories. So, let's objectively evaluate these spectacular royal theories that everyone loves so much. First up, the king's twin theory, made famous by writers like Alexandre Dumas. Look, it's an amazing story, but royal childbirths back then had over 40 witnesses present in the room. Pulling off a secret twin birth was basically impossible. Then we have Voltaire's elder brother theory. But again, the queen's pregnancies were incredibly strictly monitored. Finally, there's the illegitimate son theory, specifically focusing on a son named Vermandois. While historical records show Vermandois actually died of a fever in a military camp in 1683. That is a full 20 years before our masked man died in the Bastille. So yeah, established historical timelines and the highly public nature of royal births make these exciting theories super unlikely.
Yet, storytellers deliberately ignored the archives for centuries. They chose instead to fuel the romantic legend of an illegitimate brother or a secret twin. And why? Well, to sell books, to sell theater tickets. They wanted to create gripping narratives. Let's face it, a tragic, imprisoned royal is just a much easier story to sell than a common servant who accidentally overheard the wrong conversation.
Section 5. The final suspects. So if he wasn't royalty, who was he? Let's quickly run through the most historically plausible suspects. First, Ercole Antonio Mattioli, a double-crossing Italian diplomat. He was absolutely kidnapped by the French, sure, but records show he died at Sainte Marguerite in 1694, so he couldn't have died in the Bastille in 1703. Next, General de Boulogne, a disgraced French commander. But his arrest wasn't even a secret, it was literally in the newspapers, and he died in 1709. Then there's Eustache Dauger de Cavois, a scandalous nobleman linked to poisonings. Sounds perfect, right? Actually, scratch that. Documents prove he was locked up in an asylum in Paris at the exact same time our masked man was down in Pignerol. Which leaves us with the strongest candidate, an unknown valet who is holding incredibly sensitive state secrets.
Let's bring it all together, because the real takeaway here is profound. This wasn't about protecting the kingdom from a rival king at all. It's the tragedy of a common man swallowed whole by a jailer's massive ego and a king's paranoia. The strict isolation was about silencing an average guy who simply heard the wrong secret at the worst possible time. And the mask? It was literally just a theatrical prop used by Son Mars to boost his own resume.
Which leaves us with this haunting question to end today's explainer. Does the true identity of the man in the velvet mask even matter as much as the legend we created for him? It really makes you wonder if our deep fascination with this 300-year-old cold case is actually about the pursuit of historical truth, or if it's just our undeniable love for a thrilling story. Think about that next time you see the Hollywood myth pop up on screen. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.